No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that monopolies are bad, okay? Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Walmart, none of us like that these companies have cornered the market and eliminated so much of the competition that we don't have choices and therefore we all get screwed. Because everybody can agree with that, I think that's another reason we can all agree that everybody hates Reagan. Man, it has been a while. I've certainly been putting the inconsistent in this inconsistent miniseries, but this is another one of those great examples for when you see people looking around at the fact that there's just a handful of corporations that own literally everything we consume, and the plutocratic hellscape that has created, and then we're like, where did we go wrong? How did we get here? We all know that Reagan ruined the world in many, many ways. You know, he's got a very rich, diverse supervillain resume. So it's easy to get caught up on the big villainous things, like how he basically invented homelessness by just throwing all the mentally ill people out of hospitals and onto the streets. Or how he just completely ignored a health epidemic that was killing millions to the point where he let his own friend die rather than acknowledge that this was a real thing that he could help with. Or how he tripled the national debt and deficit mostly to build space lasers that didn't work and allow his rich friends to trickle all over us with their golden showers. It was definitely never money that trickled down from his economics. Or, you know, the breaking the unions, or the list goes on and on and on. The way in which he dismantled the antitrust system and opened the floodgates for corporate consolidation had a huge, profound impact on the world and our society today, and it is incredibly relevant right now. Because it was basically the blueprint for what Project 2025 is today and how the Heritage Foundation wants to influence the government to work. See, back around the turn of the century, it was the time of the robber baron, and we had a huge monopoly problem with the Standard Oils and the Carnegie Steels and the railroad companies. And then people started getting really fed up, and then people like Teddy Roosevelt came along with his big stick and started to break them up. Some robust antitrust laws were put in place that protected competition. And while there was certainly corporate greed and giant companies that exploited people, there was at least some guardrails that kept them from getting too big. And the main way it did this was preventing certain mergers and acquisitions. Because after all, the easiest way for a company to grow is just buy the competition. With a merger in one fell swoop, you can increase your market share and decrease the competition. Antitrust laws would prevent that in a lot of cases. For example, all those times that Chrysler had a bunch of financial problems, I'm sure GM would have loved to have swooped in and bought them, but antitrust laws prevented that. Honestly, the fact that GM wasn't broken up anyway by antitrust laws in the 1960s is just insane to me, but that's a different story. The point is that the antitrust laws prevented a lot of big mergers, and when you're an aspiring plutocrat hell-bent on world domination, that's a problem. Fast forward to the 1970s, and suddenly the Chicago school of thought on economic regulation was becoming popular among conservative economists. Conservative economists, such an oxymoron. And the Chicago school of thought was basically just like, yeah, I remember how we had like no corporate regulation and all the companies became monopolies and it ruined the country, and then we fixed that with antitrust laws. How about we try not doing the antitrust and regulation thing again like that? I know it didn't work out the first time, but that was a fluke. Just, it's gonna be better this time, trust me, bro. And because the literal definition of conservatism is, hey, let's try that shit that never worked to begin with again, conservative groups started paying attention, and then Ronald Reagan was elected president. But our antitrust system should have been able to weather this storm because it was popular policy. You were never going to find the support to overturn our antitrust legislation. I mean, after all, why would you try to fix the thing that wasn't broken and was specifically implemented to fix the thing that was broken? So conspiracy, a real-life, legitimate conspiracy, was born to change antitrust laws without actually changing antitrust laws. And in fact, there is a memo in the Reagan Library from the conspirators, George Stigner and Richard Posner, explaining the conspiracy. It's called Throttling Back Antitrust: A Practical Guide to Deregulation. You can look it up and read it for yourself. Because Ronald Reagan was too fucking stupid to ever accomplish anything on his own, these were the brains of the operation, the supervillain henchmen for the supervillain. So they went to Ronald Reagan and they're like, hey, we really want to get rid of these pesky antitrust laws, but we don't want you to focus on pushing through legislation to that effect. We just need you to appoint a guy to the head of the Antitrust Enforcement Division that doesn't believe in enforcing antitrust laws. That's what they did. He appointed Bill Baxter, and it worked. One single appointment completely undid decades of precedent and pulled the dentures out of our antitrust laws. And he was able to do that by simply rewriting the guidelines for how antitrust laws were enforced. They said, don't worry about market share. You know, it used to be if a company had too much of the market share, they would be split up to increase competition. Yeah, let's not worry about that. Let's no longer worry about mergers from companies from different industries or even different market shares of the same industries. Basically, the only thing the new guidelines enforced was if anybody was doing blatant price fixing or if two major companies did blatant lateral mergers. So two companies getting together that have large shares of the exact same markets. And even then, time, they really didn't enforce those either. That's why, despite today having antitrust laws, we have practical monopolies in almost every industry. And because this adjustment was easily slipped under the radar, it wasn't, a big bill that was passed that people could read, and because these mergers take time and these companies put a lot of effort into making you think that all of the companies they own are different companies and not just brands of the same company, like how Nestle owns all the stuff that Nestle owns, but also owns things like Gerber and Haagen-Dazs and Tidy Cats and Friskies and Alpo and all kinds of other crap you probably didn't know that they owned. So people didn't know it was happening when it was happening to be mad about it, and to this day a lot of people still don't know it's happening. And that means that while we never would have expected conservative presidents to fix this issue because to them it's not an issue, Clinton and Obama had no motivation to fix it either because they had no pressure from their constituents to fix a problem that they didn't know was a problem that needed fixing. There was nothing politically to gain, but there was a lot financially to lose because doing so would have certainly pissed off a lot of their donors. Thankfully, though, people are starting to get fed up and recognize that while they might not know what the specifics of the problem are, there's clearly a fucking problem. And the pressure from that has pushed the Biden administration to fall out of lockstep with the Chicago school of thought that every other previous administration since Reagan has marched in, and we're finally enforcing some antitrust laws again. Still not as aggressively as I'd like to see, but hey, I'll take something over nothing. I am interested to see what direction Kamala takes this because she certainly has some big ties to big tech like Google, and big tech is under the antitrust microscope right now. But I'm hoping she's going to put voters before donors, and this trend of antitrust enforcement will continue, and we can start righting the wrongs of monopoly past and hopefully fix at least one of the reasons everybody hates Reagan.